On a quiet April evening in 1991, a promising legal scholar walked out of her Cambridge home and into a chilling fate that remains unsolved to this day. Mary Joe Frug, a dedicated scholar, a valued teacher, a beloved mother, was stabbed on a nearby street. More than 3 decades later, this haunting mystery lingers without answers. This is the story of her life, her groundbreaking work, the tragedy of her death, the ongoing pursuit of justice, and the enduring legacy she left behind. Mary Joe Frug was a woman whose life story was one of brilliance, dedication, and quiet courage. Born in 1941 in St. Joseph, Missouri, she grew up in a family that valued hard work and education. Even as a child, she demonstrated a keen intellect and an ability to connect with those around her, a combination that would define her personal and professional life. From an early age, she gravitated toward books and learning, showing an interest in ideas about fairness and equality. Those who knew her as a young girl remembered her as someone who not only loved to read, but also loved to debate, asking questions that revealed an inquisitive and analytical mind. That curiosity about people and about justice guided her education and eventually her career. She attended Wellesley College, one of the most prestigious institutions for women in the United States. Graduating in 1963 with a degree in English, Wellesley was a place that nurtured her intellect and broadened her horizons, surrounding her with peers and professors who encouraged her to think critically and to consider the challenges women faced in a society that often minimized their contributions. After Wellesley, she pursued law at the George Washington University National Law Center, where she earned her Juris Doctor. At a time when female law students were still a minority, Mary Jo stood out not only for her academic achievements, but also for her willingness to take on topics that others avoided. She would later pursue a Master of Laws at New York University, deepening her expertise and refining her critical approach to legal scholarship. In the early years of her career, Mary Jo focused on public service. She worked in Washington, D.C., in New York City, providing legal services for people who otherwise could not afford representation. This experience gave her a first-hand view of the systemic inequities that often determined the outcomes of legal disputes. She saw how poverty, gender, and social status shaped the law, not in theory but in practice. These experiences left an impression on her and inspired her to move into academia, where she could influence the next generation of lawyers, while developing her own ideas about law and gender. In 1975, she began teaching at Villanova University School of Law, and she remained there for 6 years. At Villanova, she earned a reputation as an engaging teacher who cared deeply about her students. She had a gift for making the most complex legal theories accessible, weaving together doctrinal points with stories and real-world examples. She also demonstrated a sharp sense of humor and a personal warmth that made her a beloved figure on campus. Students who studied under her often remarked that she combined rigor with compassion, expecting excellence while understanding the personal struggles that law students frequently carried. During this period, she began to publish work that would lay the foundation for her later scholarship, exploring questions about how the law treated women in various contexts. In 1981, she and her husband, Gerald Frug, relocated to Cambridge, Massachusetts, when Gerald accepted a faculty position at Harvard Law School. The move placed Mary Jo in the heart of one of the most intellectually vibrant communities in the country. She took up a teaching position at New England School of Law, where she continued to inspire students, while also affiliating with the Bunting Institute at Radcliffe College as a fellow. At the time of her passing, she was engaged in research and writing that would eventually be published posthumously as a collection titled Postmodern Legal Feminism. The manuscript reflected her unique approach, which combined elements of feminist theory and critical legal studies. Pushing the boundaries of how scholars thought about law and society, Mary Jo was part of a movement that came to be known as the feminist legal critique, often shortened to femcrits. This school of thought examined the way the law treated women not simply as individuals, but as members of a broader social group whose lives were shaped by cultural expectations, biases, and structures. In her work, she explored themes such as how legal rules affected violence against women, how laws reinforced traditional maternal roles, and how women's bodies were sexualized through the law. She argued that the law could not be understood in isolation from social power, and she urged colleagues and students to think critically about what justice truly meant. Her writing was clear, bold, and thought-provoking, and though not all agreed with her positions, few doubted her brilliance. Beyond her scholarship, Mary Jo was a devoted mother and wife. She and Gerald raised 2 children together, and those who knew her remember her as someone who balanced the demands of academia with the joys of family life. She was often described as warm, approachable, and deeply committed to her loved ones. Despite the rigor of her intellectual pursuits, she valued the simple moments. Walking with her children, sharing meals with her husband, and maintaining friendships that spanned decades. On the evening of April 4, 1991, her life was tragically cut short. She left her home in Cambridge to walk to a nearby convenience store, a familiar and routine activity in her neighborhood. It was only a short distance from her residence, less than 200 yards. Yet within that brief walk, something happened that remains unsolved more than 30 years later. She was attacked and stabbed multiple times on the street near Christ Church in Cambridge. A motorist passing by saw the commotion and rushed into the church, where choir members were rehearsing, to seek help. Several people came out and recognized Mary Jo, lying gravely injured. Emergency responders were called immediately and transported her to a nearby hospital, but she did not survive her injuries. She was just 49 years old. The investigation into her death began immediately. Authorities cordoned off the scene and collected evidence, including plastered casts of footprints and a knife that was recovered nearby. The weapon was believed to be a military-style knife, but forensic testing at the time was unable to definitively link it to the attack. Witnesses described seeing a young white male, estimated to be in his late teens or early 20s, around 6 feet tall with brown hair, running from the scene. Despite the description, no suspect was ever identified, and the case grew cold. Investigators ruled out robbery as a motive since Mary Jo's purse was found untouched. This raised questions about whether the attack was random or targeted. Some speculated that her feminist work may have made her a target, though no evidence supported that theory. In the months following her death, the academic community was shaken. Colleagues mourned her loss, students held vigils, and friends and family struggled to comprehend how such a promising life could end so suddenly and violently. On the first anniversary of her death, New England's School of Law announced a $25,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. Despite the reward and the widespread coverage, no one came forward with information sufficient to solve the case. Over time, the trail went cold, though the case has never been closed. The aftermath of her death was made more painful by a controversy that erupted a year later. In 1992, a student-run journal at Harvard Law School published an unfinished essay Mary Jo had been working on at the time of her death. The piece reflected her feminist critique of the law and contained sharp observations about the ways the legal system failed women. Around the same time, a campus parody group created a spoof of her essay, mocking both her work and her tragic death. The parody was distributed on the anniversary of her murder, sparking outrage. The editors eventually apologized, acknowledging that the timing and content of the parody had caused unnecessary pain to her family and colleagues. The incident remains a painful reminder of the dismissive attitudes Mary Jo and other feminist scholars often faced in their work. In the years that followed, Mary Jo's colleagues and students worked to preserve her legacy. The Women and the Law Case books she had helped create continued to be published in updated editions. Carrying her name forward as a co-author, her unfinished manuscript was edited and published posthumously, ensuring her ideas reached a wider audience. At New England School of Law, a lecture series and scholarships were established in her name. Conferences and symposia were dedicated to exploring the questions she raised, extending her influence long after her death. Her work became part of the foundation of feminist legal theory, studied by countless students who never had the chance to know her in person. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. In 2019, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office announced the creation of a cold case unit to re-examine unsolved crimes, and Mary Jo's case was included in the files to be reviewed. Advances in forensic science have made it possible to analyze evidence in new ways. But as of today, no arrest has been made and no suspect has been identified publicly. The case remains open, and investigators continue to encourage anyone with information to come forward. Mary Jo's husband, Gerald, carried on his academic career at Harvard, specializing in municipal law and urban policy. He continued to live with the weight of his wife's unsolved murder until his own passing in November 2023. Their children and friends have continued to keep her memory alive, remembering her as a brilliant scholar, a loving mother, and a woman of integrity and courage. The story of Mary Joe Frug is not simply the story of a crime. It is the story of a life that mattered, a voice that challenged injustice, and a legacy that continues to inspire. Her case remains a reminder of the violence women face, the limitations of the justice system, and the enduring need to seek truth. Though decades have passed, her ideas live on in classrooms, in scholarship, and in the efforts of those who still hope one day her case will be solved. Her life illuminated the world of legal theory and touched the lives of her students and family. Her passing left a void that can never be filled. Yet her words continue to spark conversation, her teaching continues to inspire, and her memory continues to call for justice. The search for answers remains unfinished, but her legacy remains strong. A testament to a woman who gave everything she had to the pursuit of justice, equality, and understanding. Thank you for watching Fatal Secrets of True Crime. Subscribe for more stories like this. Real crimes, hidden truths, and the secrets they tried to bury. Your support helps keep these stories alive and the pressure on for answers. Till next time, remember, every secret eventually comes to light.